Everybody loves the fantasy of a magical jump in wealth. Take $10,000, make a few brilliant moves, and somehow wake up a millionaire. It is one of the most attractive ideas in personal finance because it sounds clean, fast, and cinematic. 10,000 in, 1 million out, 100 times your money. It feels like a puzzle with a hidden answer, like somewhere out there are 5 secret buttons that the wealthy already know how to push. But let's start with the truth, because the truth is actually more exciting than the fantasy. There are absolutely ways to turn $10,000 into $1 million. People do it, but almost never by treating the 10,000 as the entire engine. They do it by using that 10,000 to buy leverage. That is the core idea. If you try to grow 10,000 to 1 million through ordinary, low-risk investing alone, it can happen, but it usually takes a long time. A very long time. That path is real, respectable, and powerful, but it is not what most people mean when they say fastest. Fastest usually means one thing. You need an asset that can scale faster than your labor and compound faster than your savings rate. That means ownership, skill, distribution, or leverage. Not gambling, not wishful thinking, not random speculation dressed up as ambition, because this is where people get trapped. They hear fastest and immediately think highest risk. But that is not the smartest interpretation. The smartest interpretation is highest upside relative to starting capital with real control. That changes the whole conversation. The fastest path from 10,000 to 1 million is almost never putting 10,000 into something and waiting passively for it to become a million. The fastest path is using 10,000 to create or acquire something that can produce much more than 10,000 of value repeatedly. So the real game is not asking what investment turns 10,000 into 1 million the fastest. The real game is asking, what can 10,000 help me build, access, learn, launch, or own that has asymmetric upside? That is the question. And once you understand that, 5 paths stand out above almost everything else. The first is using $10,000 to build a high-income skill into a business. This is not the sexiest answer, which is exactly why it works. If you can take $10,000 and use it to increase your earning power in a way the market pays for immediately, you are no longer just investing money. You are investing in a cash flow machine. Think about what that money could buy. Training, coaching, sales education, copywriting, video editing, paid media, coding, design, automation, AI implementation, a better laptop, software, a clean website, outreach systems, time to practice, time to sell. People underestimate this because it does not sound like a classic investment, but in reality, this is one of the highest return uses of capital available to ordinary people. Why? Because a skill can go from earning you nothing to earning you 5,000, 10,000, even 20,000 a month if it solves a painful business problem. And once a skill becomes income, income can become savings. Savings can become investments. Investments can become ownership. That is how $10,000 starts acting bigger than it is. Now here is the key. Not all skills are equal. The fastest paths usually come from skills attached to revenue, efficiency, or growth. Businesses pay faster for things that make them money, save them money, or save them time. That is why sales, marketing, lead generation, paid advertising, conversion optimization, automation, operations, and business development tend to outperform more generic skills in terms of speed. It is much easier to go from 10,000 to 1 million when your first step is learning how to produce cash flow at a high rate. Because once you can create income on demand, you are no longer trapped in the slow lane. The second path is starting a simple service business with low startup costs and high margins. This is where $10,000 becomes especially powerful. A lot of people think businesses require huge capital. Some do. Many do not. A service business can often be started with very little money compared with the upside it can produce. The trick is to stay out of crowded, vague, low-value services and move toward painful, specific, measurable problems. Small businesses will always pay for help with things like getting customers, handling operations, improving online presence, creating content, organizing systems, automating workflows, improving retention, or solving expensive bottlenecks. If your $10,000 funds the setup of a lean service business, That capital is buying speed. It can buy branding, software, outreach tools, legal setup, a basic funnel, equipment, and a few months of runway while you sign clients. This matters because going from 10,000 to 1 million is usually not a single leap. It is often a sequence. 10,000 helps launch a service. The service generates strong monthly cash flow. That cash flow gets reinvested into team, systems, and acquisition. Then the business becomes scalable. Then the business becomes sellable. And now you are no longer talking about saving your way to a million. You are talking about owning something that could be worth a million. That is a very different game. And yes, this takes work. A lot of work. But the reason it is one of the fastest paths is that effort plus ownership is more explosive than effort alone. The third path is using $10,000 to build digital products, content, or intellectual property. This is where scale becomes really interesting. A service business is powerful, but it still has labor intensity. A digital product, media asset, software tool, paid newsletter, education product, or niche content brand can grow with far less friction once it gains traction. This is also why the internet has changed wealth creation so dramatically. Before, scale required physical infrastructure. Now, scale often requires attention, expertise, and distribution. $10,000 can buy time, equipment, editing, design, software, advertising tests, audience research, and a runway for consistency. And consistency matters because most digital businesses fail not because the model is impossible, but because the creator quits before the flywheel starts turning. What makes this path fast is not that it is easy. It is that the upside is nonlinear. One great product can sell thousands of times. One strong content engine can attract leads for years. One useful tool can reach far beyond your local network. One solid niche audience can support sponsorships, products, services, and community offers. This is where people suddenly understand the difference between income and asset creation. If you make a one-time sale, that is income. If you build a repeatable system that keeps bringing people in, that is an asset. And assets are what make the jump to a million realistic. A small media business, a niche education company, a software-assisted service, a digital template ecosystem, a specialized course library, a monetized audience in a profitable niche. These can all begin from a modest amount of capital if the strategy is strong enough. Again, $10,000 is not the magic. The asset is the magic. 10,000 just helps you build it faster. The fourth path is acquiring equity through sweat, skill, or small business acquisition. This one is massively overlooked. Most people think in only two categories: start from scratch or buy stocks. But there is a middle category that can be incredibly powerful: getting ownership in something already working. Sometimes that means buying a tiny online business with solid cash flow and improving it. Sometimes it means partnering into a business where your skill adds growth. Sometimes it means using $10,000 as part of a deal, down payment, or restructuring effort in exchange for equity. Why does this matter? Because wealth is not usually created through wages. It is created through ownership. If you own a piece of something valuable and that thing grows, your upside can become disproportionate to your initial cash. Now, this does not mean recklessly buying a bad business because some social media clip made it sound easy. That is how people lose money with confidence. It means understanding that if you can evaluate cash flow, identify inefficiencies, and add real value, then small acquisitions or equity-based partnerships can be one of the fastest ways to create net worth. Imagine a modest business earning decent profit but operating poorly. If your $10,000 helps secure the deal, improve operations, refresh sales, modernize systems, or unlock growth, your equity value can increase much faster than a passive portfolio would. That is the whole point of leverage through competence. The million is not coming from the initial money alone. It is coming from the value you help create after the money gets deployed. The fifth path is concentrated investing, but only after the first four paths have increased your capital base. Now, this is where people may be surprised. Yes, investing still belongs on the list, but not as the fantasy version people often want to hear. If you put $10,000 into a diversified index fund and leave it there, that is smart. It is disciplined. It is likely to work well over time. But by itself, it is not usually the fastest path to 1 million. However, if you use the first four paths to increase your income and ownership, then investing becomes the amplifier that locks in wealth. This is where million-dollar outcomes become much more realistic. Business throws off profit. Skill creates cash flow. Digital assets create scale. Ownership creates upside. Then investing compounds the surplus. That is how serious wealth often gets built in the real world. And this is important because people make a huge mistake when they ask for the fastest path from 10,000 to 1 million. They assume there is one path. Usually there are two phases. Phase 1 is escape velocity. Phase 2 is compounding. Escape velocity is about increasing your ability to create capital. Compounding is about protecting and multiplying that capital. If you try to skip phase 1 and force compounding to do all the work from 10,000, you are probably choosing a much slower route. If you master phase 1 and then hand the results to compounding, everything changes. Now let's talk about what separates the people who actually do this from the people who endlessly consume financial content about doing it. The first difference is they stop worshiping the starting amount. $10,000 matters. It is meaningful. It gives options. But it is not enough to carry a weak strategy. People lose years asking, what is the best thing to do with my 10,000? A better question is, what model gives me the best chance of turning skill, effort, and ownership into rapid value creation? That is a much more serious question. The second difference is they focus on asymmetry. Asymmetry means limited downside relative to upside. A strong skill can have huge upside. A lean service business can have huge upside. A small digital asset can have huge upside. A smart equity deal can have huge upside. These paths are not guaranteed, but they are asymmetrical because the capital required is relatively small compared with what the outcome could become. That is very different from throwing $10,000 into pure speculation and hoping randomness becomes strategy. The third difference is they understand speed versus probability. This is crucial. The fastest theoretical path is not always the most probable path. For example, concentrated bets on startups, crypto, or hyper-speculative assets can, in theory, get you there extremely fast. But the probability of failure is so high that for most people, it is not really a rational wealth-building plan. So when I say fastest, I mean fastest realistic path with skill, control, and repeatability, not fastest fantasy outcome. That is an adult definition of speed. And it matters because if you want 1 million, you should care not just about upside, but about survivability. The fourth difference is they reinvest aggressively at the right stage. This is where many people stall. They start making more money, but instead of feeding the highest return machine they've built, they upgrade their life too quickly. The apartment gets nicer, the car gets nicer, the identity expands, the visible lifestyle improves faster than the invisible asset base, and that kills momentum. The people who move fastest usually look strangely restrained for a while, not because they are miserable, but because they understand the season they are in. When a model is working, starving it can be a bigger mistake than overspending. Reinvesting into systems, talent, acquisition, and distribution when the economics are proven can create extraordinary acceleration. The fifth difference is they stay close to reality. They measure what works. They track acquisition costs, margins, close rates, retention, cash flow, and conversion. They do not build a $1 million fantasy in their head. They build a feedback loop in real life. That mindset is what turns big financial dreams into business-like decisions. So if I had $10,000 and the goal was to reach 1 million as fast as realistically possible, here is what I would not do. I would not expect passive investing alone to do it quickly. I would not treat speculation as a strategy. I would not spread the money across 10 random ideas just to feel diversified. I would not buy status before buying leverage. And I would not ask the money to do a job that skill and ownership should be doing. What would I do? I would build or sharpen a high-income skill tied to value creation. I would turn that skill into a cash-flowing service or business model. I would look for ways to productize, systemize, or scale it through media, digital products, or recurring offers. I would pursue ownership whenever possible, and then I would use investing as the compounding engine after income and equity had created momentum. That is the real answer. Not a trick, not a gimmick, not a lottery ticket, a sequence. Use $10,000 to buy leverage. Use leverage to create cash flow. Use cash flow to build ownership. Use ownership to create scale. Use scale and surplus to compound. That is how 10,000 starts becoming a $1 million story. And maybe the most important part is this. The path that gets you there fastest is usually the path that turns you into someone capable of creating value at a much higher level. Because in the end, the million is not just about the money. It is about becoming the kind of person who can build, sell, solve, own, and compound. Once that happens, 1 million stops looking like a miracle. It starts looking like math with character attached. That is a very different level of wealth. And that is why the fastest path is not really about the 10,000. It is about what that 10,000 unlocks in you.